Betsy West and Julie Cohen, you are the co-directors of the fantastic documentary RBG about Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I'm curious, how did you two first become aware of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, even before the making of this movie?
Yeah, I was working in the 1970s and in the 80s in network news, and I realized that many women went into the workforce and had opportunities because of the women's movement. But I really didn't know about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's role really as the chief litigator who helped bring equal rights for women in America. So it was in 2009, I was working on a documentary about the modern women's movement. That's when I also met Julie. She was working on it too. And Gloria Steinem was the person who told me about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, what she had done in the 1970s as a young lawyer to secure equal rights for women. So that was when we heard about it. Then a few years later, we started talking.
Yeah, Justice Ginsburg really blew up on the internet in 2013, 2014 as the notorious RBG. And so many young women were becoming really obsessed with some of the cool stuff she was doing as a Supreme Court justice, some of the powerful dissents she was writing. But we knew that a lot of those people who were, supposedly her fangirls didn't know the full story, didn't know everything that she had achieved to secure equal rights for women and men under the U.S. Constitution. It's not an exaggeration to say that she changed the world for American women. If there's anyone who's deserving of a full dress telling of their life story in film form, it's gotta be RBG.
And on top of it all, an amazing love story, a feminist love story. So it just had the makings of a great documentary.
Are you there?
Hi.
We can, yeah. Well, now, yeah, but we couldn't hear you. You were.
You were frozen too. That was why I was asking.
Yeah.
You can hear me now, though, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things that came across very well about Justice Ginsburg is that she's kind of very I don't want to say guarded, but she's definitely I just don't know the word, but was it difficult for her to open up about her personal life when you started making the documentary?
Justice Ginsburg is a reserved person, and she, in some ways, you would say an introvert. She's not a likely subject really for a documentary, but I think at this point in her life, she understands that her life story is inspiring for many people, really across the board. And so when we sat down with her to interview her, she was very forthcoming, and she also gave us access to, not only her the speaking events that she does around the country, but some amazing personal moments with her and her granddaughter, and working, and then of course working out, for her to allow us to do that, because I think she knows she's a bit of a role model for young women and for older women as well.
Yeah, the legal and political aspects to this story and their importance and interest is kind of obvious, but sort of bringing forth Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the human being, was probably one of our biggest challenges in making this film and turning her life into a real story that people were going to want to watch in theaters. And it was fortunate that we were able to spend time with her over a long period of time, over more than a year of film, and kind of come up with ways other than just traditional sit-down interviews to let the audience feel like they're really getting to know her, showing her footage of different parts of her life, and even of the Kate McKinnon impression of her as the dancing judge on SNL, spending time, in her home with her granddaughter, bringing out, you know, the great work of our cinematographer, Claudia Raschke, who is like so into the close-ups that really give you those little moments where there's a glimmer in her eye or a sly smile at a great moment that really, that we think really make her come through as a person, not just a Justin.
And that, well, that's actually a question I actually had. I loved the footage that you used of her workout because of the sweatshirt she was wearing that says Super Diva, which I'm pretty sure I've seen several of my gay friends with that exact same shirt.
After RBG.
I think before, actually before, but it actually kind of lines up with where I think their style is. What I was curious about is, are there other, does she have other like t-shirts with funny slogans on them for her workout?
Well, that's the only time we were in the workout. We understand that she got that Super Diva t-shirt from the Washington National Opera, where she is a frequent audience member and where we filmed her doing a speaking role in the opera. She's quick to say that if she'd had her heart's desire, she would have been a great opera diva, but her voice is not up to it. She did have an opportunity to perform this role at the opera, and they gave her the T-shirt, which she proudly wears for her workout.
Yes, it was we had not seen that T-shirt, and we did not tell her what we wanted her to wear for the workout. But believe me, when we were in there with our camera crew and her personal trainer Brian Johnson already in there, and she walked in wearing that, you know, Super Diva sweatshirt, showing that she had really come to play. Like it was the beginning of a very wonderful afternoon for us.
It was amazing. We do know that she carries around a bag with her. When we were at Sundance, where she saw the film, we had a photograph taken with her, and she was carrying a little tote bag that says, "I dissent." And it was down on the floor, and somebody tried to move it away. She said, "No, no, no, I want that in the picture."
That's what a little drawing of her and "I dissent," and she loves that. She loves that bag.
She loves that. So, yeah.
Everything from this interview is just making me love her even more, and I didn't even think that was possible.
Yeah, she's pretty inspiring and pretty lovable.
So one of the things that I also thought was really interesting about the movie is that when I was watching the opening credits, it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of, if not all of those roles that are shown in the opening credits are roles being filled by women, which is so great. I mean, we only just recently, after 90 years of the Oscars, finally got a woman nominated for Best Cinematography. Was that a conscious choice, or was that just sort of happy coincidence?
No, not a happy coincidence. Absolutely a conscious choice. Here we are, two women directors / producers making a film about a woman who has spent her whole life advancing the rights of women. So what more, you know, what better choice was there than to try to fill all our key creative and executive roles with women? That's exactly how it turned out. As you say, you know, it wasn't until, was it last year, that I think Rachel Morrison was nominated as Best Cinematographer as a woman. There are so many incredibly talented women directors, so few of them getting the right jobs they deserve to get recognized. Women DPs, women editors, and yet, you know, with not too much effort and a little bit of intention, we managed to fill all those key creative roles. Or composer Miriam Cutler, you know, with like brilliant, hardworking, committed, creative women.
Yeah, no, some people have said, "How did you find all those women?" It really wasn't that hard.
I'm sure they're out. I'm sure they were out there.
They are there. And it was, you know, it really kind of added to the experience, I think, of working on the film. It was a lot of fun. You know, maybe it's because everyone was a woman, there were no major blow-ups, no, you know, uber drama. Everything went really well, and you know, it was a pleasure.
So also getting back to Justice Ginsburg, one of the things that I was hoping would be addressed in the documentary but wasn't, was her relationship with Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman, and for I believe throughout the rest of her O'Connor's tenure, they were the only two women, and not until Sotomayor came on board.
Yeah, had already retired before Justices Sotomayor and Kagan came on the court.
Yeah,
and of course we just had unfortunately we had Sandra Day O'Connor back in the news with her recent health diagnosis, which was just heartbreaking after having seen her husband go through that. I was wondering, did she talk at all about her relationship with Justice O'Connor?
Yeah, I mean, they had an extremely good relationship, and we would have interviewed Justice O'Connor had she not had this health issue, and that really was the reason why we couldn't talk to her.
Right.
And you know, at a certain point, it was very important to include her. We did include that beautiful picture of the two of them when Justice Ginsburg came on the court, and there's the soundbite of, and then there were two, and you see them just sitting there with all the statues of the men all around. You know, we did that to really symbolize how great the relationship was. It's just, you know, at a certain point, without an interview with her, you know, it kind of didn't fit into the narrative, and so we wound up not doing much more than that.
Also, as Justice Ginsburg points out in the film, it was Sandra Day O'Connor who got her started on the journey of the collars. You know, the idea that, like, you know, just because you're a justice doesn't mean you have to give up being a woman. I mean, it seems like a symbolic thing, but the whole idea, and it was a piece of advice that Justice O'Connor gave to Justice Ginsburg, that, you know, this is a way to add a little feminine touch to the robe. And it, again, it seems like a small symbol, but it actually has some meaning. And Justice Ginsburg has really taken that ball and run with it with her collection of extremely fabulous jabots, is the name of the official name of the collars that they wear.
I actually thought that was really interesting because it's something that some of the men have done as well. Chief Justice Rehnquist had those yellow stripes on his robes, which were an homage to Gilbert and Sullivan.
With an operatic, actually, that had their origin in opera symbolism. So
one of the things that I thought was so interesting was listening to the audio of the oral arguments from when she was arguing cases, and that one moment where Justice Rehnquist cuts into her, and you know, so, and then, like, what, 12 years later they become colleagues. What was there any friction there? Did she talk about any friction that happened because of that?
No, I mean, you're talking about how, as a litigator, she would be making these very serious constitutional arguments, and occasionally the various justices would throw in what to them was a joke about women, like, oh, gee, wouldn't you just be satisfied with Susan B. Anthony on the dollar? Like, ha, 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 isn't that funny? You know, her attitude about it all when we asked her was, well, you know, they just didn't get it, and I treated them like that I was a kindergarten teacher. I had to help them, to explain to them that discrimination is serious. I don't think she held it against them, and I know that she had a very a good relationship with her chief.
And you know, here's the thing: her teaching worked. She saw herself as a teacher, trying to teach the justices, no, there really is a gender discrimination. Discrimination against women is a really serious problem. They didn't get it at the time, but over time, with her hard work, they did. By the time of the Virginia Military Institute opinion, which Justice Ginsburg wrote, saying that, you know, making a pretty broad decision from the court that discrimination against women should be presumed unconstitutional. That was a big step forward for the court. And by the time of that ruling in 1996, Chief Justice Rehnquist signed on to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's opinion. She was extremely proud of that. And she basically, the one dissenter was Scalia, and RBG never let Scalia forget, oh, how did the Chief Justice vote on that one again? That's right, he voted with me. You know, she had and that's a Ginsburg, but like she could have.
Yeah.
So one of the things you were just talking about is how over the course of making this film, it kind of took some turns. Like you weren't able to get the interview with Justice O'Connor. Were there any other real life events occurring that sort of became an obstacle in filming, or sort of threw a roadblock in the way?
Well, you may remember that there was a very divisive political campaign going on, the presidential campaign, which was happening as we were filming. I mean, it didn't really throw roadblocks in the way, but it certainly informed our work as we were going about telling, this very important story. It was a very polarizing time in our country. I think that influenced our decision to really emphasize the Scalia-Ginsburg story to some extent. And personally, it was just a great thing for us to be working on this film during that time. I mean, it just seems, since the film has come out, there have been, many developments. The Me Too movement, Time's Up, and then the replacement of two justices with two very more conservative justices, and the Kavanaugh hearings. It just kind of goes on and on, that has made the film, I think, very resonant.
It seemed to a lot of Americans that in some ways Justice Ginsburg is one of the strongholds, one of the main pillars of dissent against some of the current flow of history. I think we had a little concern at the time that of Donald Trump's election. We were just in the middle of our filming. Is she gonna stop participating with our documentary because she's worried about how it would be perceived to be so out there in public? We were pleased to see that in a time when she's ever more relevant, that she continued to cooperate in the making of the film and didn't cancel any of the future events or the interviews that we still had scheduled, and that she was willing to move forward with the project. Like, she's an important person in history right now. A lot of people in the country, I think people on both sides see it that way, actually. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg knows it.
Yeah.
And so one last question I want to ask you. I mean, there are so many more I would love to ask you, but I do want to know, so of course, when you're making a documentary, there's always so much footage and there's so much material to, pick to make a, 2-hour, 90-minute movie. I was wondering if there was an anecdote or something that she discussed that for one reason or another just couldn't make it into the film, but that you were really compelled by.
So we did a lot of filming, a lot of interviews. There were great stories, and we couldn't include them all. Certainly, there was a wonderful story with Justice Scalia describing a scene on a beach. They were attending some kind of a conference together, and they're down, this resort. And the next thing you know, Justice Ginsburg is in a harness, a couple 100 feet up, parasailing. And Justice Scalia said, I looked up and I just thought, oh my goodness, she's so tiny, she's never going to come back to the ground. I mean, it was an adorable story, but at a certain point, we didn't have, we asked.
We looked at the footage.
Couldn't find
really,
any picture.
Does anyone take a picture of Justice Ginsburg parasailing? Where is your camera? But
and we had the wonderful elephant story, which was kind of a similar moment. So there were things like that. But I think we were guided by our desire to tell the story of this extraordinary woman, who she is, what makes her tick, and her work on behalf of her vision of our Constitution, that we the people means everybody. And, that message really does resound, it seems to us. And that was kind of informing all the decisions that we made about what would or wouldn't be included.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end on. Betsy and Julie, and your magnificent jabos. That's what they're called.
Jabbo.
Jabbo. Okay.
Maybe, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best this award season.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.